and welcome to another FaithWorks. I am so privileged these last 4 months. I've had Sister Helen Prejean 2 months in a row. I had my brother last month, and believe it or not, he was able to stay for the whole month. He visited, and he's back in the studio today. This time he says, why don't we talk about social justice, Jim? Why don't we introduce, since you have a new program called Catholic Social Teaching 101, I could share some songs that might be able to help people understand a principle they're not going to get. But a song, it may work. It may actually help. So we're going to share with you today 4 songs that are basically multi-purposed, but they also serve the idea of Catholic social justice. But Rob, before we get into the teaching we're going to do in the music, remind people a little bit about what you're doing in the Bay Area and how it is that social justice is something you love using your music, your choir, your writing, and your art to share with people in both San Francisco and Oakland in the Archdiocese and the Diocese. What can you share?
Well, the odd thing, and I think the sad thing, is that social justice is considered the church's secret teaching.
You bet.
That here it is at the core of what we are about, and yet it's called the church's best kept secret. So I took on the task as a music director to say, no more secrets. We're going to get this out there. And it's not like you have to force a liturgy to, well, can we force this to be a social justice liturgy? If we're reading the scriptures correctly, every week can have this dramatic thrust of social justice. That's what Jesus was all about. So everything from the opening hymn to the gift preparation, the communion song, and the recessional song, which we don't call recessional anymore.
Not anymore.
We call it commissioning song or sending forth, because our job as musicians and especially as music directors is to send people out of that church, not just, wow, that was a great mass. The homily only lasted 74 minutes. That was really good. Our job is to send us all forth changed. If we arrive at 9, by 10, we should be ready to do what we hear in the gospel.
Now, one thing that I'd like to share, if I could, are the 7 principles of Catholic social teaching, which Rob says are the best kept secret. If all I did was have you see them come up one after the other, and then when Rob introduces us to his songs, he may find that one of them captures the spirit of one or another of these 7 principles. They all stand independent of each other, but then again, they form a great web, and this is what I'd like to hopefully share with you today. The first principle of Catholic social teaching happens to be something we call the life and dignity of the human person. This is pivotal to our Catholic thought. It is the beginning of all of our moral ethic, and it is also something we can sing about and pray about. The second principle builds right on that first one, and we call it the call to family, community, and participation. It's very important that we are not only individuals, but we are a community. We're a family. We're a faith group. We're a family, basically. The third principle, consequent to those 2, it comes with rights and it comes with responsibilities. We, as baptized Catholics, Christians, are commissioned with privileges and duties, rights and responsibilities. The fourth principle, pivotal to Catholic social thinking, the option for the poor and the vulnerable, and it's called a preferential option, meaning it's our priority. The poor, the disadvantaged, the disenfranchised, the immigrant, the migrant, all of those on the lower rungs of what we call society. The fifth principle, the dignity of work and the rights of workers. The Catholic Church not only began by supporting labor unions, but it has been consistently, hopefully, being faithful to that in its own ministry. Sixth, solidarity, which basically means we're all in this thing together. And the last principle, which has been there for a while, but is now in high gear thanks to Pope Francis's extraordinary encyclical Laudato Si. The seventh principle is called care for God's creation. Well, Rob, I've played the 7 themes out there. Which is one song that you'd like to start with? Introduce it, sing it, let us know why this is a social justice song.
All right. Well, even before Pope Francis came in, these thoughts of how can we as Catholics take what we believe out of the church and into the streets. How can we become people of social justice, not just people of no meat on Friday, go to church on Sunday? That's way too easy. And the world doesn't need less meat eaters. Well,
it does.
I take that back. Yes, we do need fewer meat eaters, but we need people with meat on their bones and meat in the way they live their lives. And composers like David Haas, whom you'll know from every hymnal, has so much of his good music in there. He said, you know what, let's deal with this. And he wrote a song called We Are Called. And this type of song works well as an entrance hymn or a processional hymn, an opening hymn, or it even works more fluidly as a sending forth hymn where we've just heard the word, we've been fed by Eucharist, now we go out because we are called to do something.
Sounds like shalom. You can say hello or goodbye.
Exactly.
It works.
Yep. And what's powerful about this song is it takes a look at all of the 7 principles which you just enumerated. And without saying principle number 1, it infuses the piece with those principles. And here's how it goes. Come, live in the light, shine with the joy and the love of the Lord. We are called to be hope for the hopeless, so hatred and blindness will be no more. We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another, to walk humbly with God. Sing a new song. Sing of that great day when all will be one. God will reign and we'll walk with each other as sisters and brothers, united in love. We are called to act with justice. We are called to love tenderly. We are called to serve one another, to walk humbly with God.
I really do enjoy that song. It's not that every single song does resonate with a community or with an individual. What do you find the response when you play it, when the choir sings it, when the community sings it, the response to that call? Do they find it that they're convicted by it? What happens when people sing it, Rob?
Well, I can say somewhat humorously, if the people were asleep during the rest of the Mass, by the time this song is being played, they are not asleep anymore. And some people have actually commented that, you know, I was kind of sleepy after communion, but then, wow. And that's the way we should leave church. Wow. We should leave the church with a sense of, I've been fed. Now, how selfish of it would be for me to take what I've been fed with and just keep it to myself. So, props to David Haas and to so many contemporary composers who are seeing the sending forth hymn not as a let's give God props only, but let's challenge us to do what we've just heard about in the gospel.
Now, one thing interesting that we just did, folks, is play a sort of like commissioning song, but let's do it in reverse. What do you think is the most awesome gathering song ever? Because it is. Gather Us In was awesome, but this one even more awesome.
Sure. Well, coming from the same composer, Marty Hagen has such an in-depth understanding not only of the theological principles of music, but of what will engage an assembly lyrically, harmonically, emotionally. And if we're going to church just to be spiritual, what a waste, because we are not just spiritual human beings. We are this wonderfully enfleshed soul, body, mind, all in one. And this song, All Are Welcome, is a great way to begin a liturgy because it reminds us we aren't any holier than the person sitting next to us. The person we passed on the street is no less worthy of God's love than we who drove in our 2016 new car. We are all welcome. And when you think of whom Jesus hung out with, it was not the elite of the day, and yet they were welcome in his world. And through that welcome, we become more and more Christ-like. And this song, again, works very well as a gathering hymn, but because of its kind of sense of mission, it could also be used in other parts of the Mass.
Let us build a house where love can dwell and all can safely live, a place where saints and children tell how hearts learn to forgive, built of hopes and dreams and visions, rock of faith and vault of grace. Here the love of Christ shall end divisions. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where prophets speak and words are strong and true, where all God's children learn to seek, to dream God's reign anew. Here the cross shall stand as a witness and as symbol of God's grace. Here as one we claim the faith of Jesus. All are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place. Let us build a house where all are named, their songs and visions heard, and loved and treasured, taught and claimed as words within the Word, built of tears and cries and laughter, prayers of faith and songs of grace. Let this house proclaim from forward to after, all are welcome, all are welcome, all are welcome in this place.
That song that we use at the Newman Center whenever we gather for our Tuesday night celebration of the families that come together, what we call Faith, Family, and Friends, that's our opening motif. That's our song. That's what the parish sings. So it's not only at liturgy, but at other gatherings, we find it like our theme song. So on that note, we will take our well-earned break, give you a chance to get ready for 2 more songs, and we will be back, so please stay tuned for the second half of a program on social justice ministry song aids. Stay tuned. Welcome back to FaithWorks. I'm still Jim Grant, and that's still my brother Rob. We are so glad that we have been able, for 2 months now, to have Rob share music that helps us celebrate, as you could see from last month's program, the Year of Mercy, this month's program, social justice themes. The song that Rob will do again now, which also served as a song very relevant to the mystery of mercy, compassion, forgiveness, but it's also going to be filled with social justice undercurrent. Can you introduce us, Rob, to Christ who calls us to compassion and help us see why this would be needing to be included in our repertoire?
It's not as if the church suddenly said, oh my goodness, there's a compassion thing. We haven't even talked about this before. You know, Jesus is the picture of compassion. But in conversation for the last 2,000 years, the focus has been on God's love of us. And yes, we have the commandments, we have the corporal works of mercy, and mercy is certainly thematic throughout the 2,000 years of our history. But it's only become clear lately that doing good deeds is not what we're called to do. We are called to compassion, which means, from the Latin, to suffer with. Not just to say, oh, poor guy, I'll donate to the Hunger Society. We need to be more present to each other, not just on the large issues of world hunger, but to be present to each other in conversation, in the family, in our workplace. If we think compassion is something which doctors show to their patients, and teachers may show it to a student who's failing, and a mother may show it to her baby, yes, of course, those are beautiful things. But the way we converse with each other, it can be a compassionate conversation, or it can be a, oh yeah, wow, that's tough, you lost your job. Yeah, you know, the same thing happened to me. Yeah, you know, yeah, and then it takes the conversation away, and the poor person isn't being held in compassion to suffer with. So there's a wonderful Gaelic tune which has had a beautiful melody. It was called seeking spirit seeking light and beauty. Very theological concept. Nothing wrong with theological concepts, but I took that theme and said, let's put a very theological concept, the theology of compassion, into the theme. And so here is the ancient Gaelic tune of Donnoch Trianoid, and I've called it Christ Who Calls Us to Compassion. Christ who calls us to compassion, to the pain beyond our own. Here we pray for loving kindness and confess our hearts of stone. Help us soften what we've hardened, what we cling to out of pride, so we hear with ears attentive, see with new eyes open wide. As we listen to your word, Lord, let our minds be fertile place for the seeds of true compassion and the planting of your grace. If we listen without changing, then our listening's all in vain. For your word calls us to heal and to ease each other's pain. As we gather here together, wronged and wounded, gifted, blessed, we remember your forgiveness and the challenge of your test. If we seek not to be judged, without judging let us be. As we hold, so shall we be held. As we loose, shall we be free. As we hold, so shall we be held. As we loose, shall we be free.
The other day, I was actually listening to a disc of Studs Terkel introducing or talking with Isaac Bashevis Singer, the Yiddish writer. And believe it or not, they were talking about this idea that became brand new to Mr. Singer. When Studs says, Isaac, you're a man of compassion in your writing, and there's so much passion in it. And then Isaac Bashevis Singer says, Studs, I never saw the connection. You've given me a revelation. This is a gift from God. To see that without passion, there can be no compassion. So this idea of connecting, in the first show we did this song, it was all about compassion. And yet, this compassion needs to be passionate. It needs to take flesh. It needs to be incarnated and out there. It needs to be present in the world. Rob, you have one more chance to sing one last song, God of Love, God of Compassion, parting gift to our community. What might you like to say as you sing this song? We have 3 minutes.
This melody has been around in the Catholic world and in the Christian world for centuries. In fact, it was one of the first melodies that was taken into the Protestant tradition when Martin Luther decided that he couldn't handle the Catholics.
Could not do that.
So this tune goes way back, and it's been set to many, many lyrics. When you hear it, you say, "Oh my goodness, that's this song, or that's that song, that's that song." It's true. It is many, many songs, but given the call that we have to be people of compassion, to be not just people who adore God and give props to God, but people who say, God has called us to bring His love into this very love-needy world. So the lyric is called God of Love, Gift of Compassion. When you hear the melody, you'll say, oh my goodness, I remember that melody.
God of love, gift of compassion, draw us now to share this meal. Sacred earth and blessed heaven, joined as one, your love to heal. Here you've called us, here we've gathered, here your presence in word and bread. Open our hearts, our minds and spirits, so we with your great love are fed. As we hear your word proclaimed, as we join in song and prayer, may we hear anew your gospel. Send us forth this earth to repair. Here you've called us, here we've gathered, here we find you incarnate word. Open our hands in loving service, so to live what we have heard. So to live what we have heard.
So to live what we have heard. A perfect, I think, conclusion to our program today. It's been a real grace to have Rob able to visit us again and share 4 hymns, 4 songs that help us understand the depth of what social justice could be. We have the words, but now we need to make them become incarnate. We need to give them flesh. We need to make them take life. On that happy note and challenge, I thank you and hope to see you next month for another episode of FaithWorks. Till then, God bless.